Bill on the table. That is our top story right now, and that is the fight to repeal and replace Obama. Republicans will unveil their revamped health care legislation today. It comes on the heels of a stern message from President Trump yesterday telling Congress to get this done.
It has to get passed. They have to do it. They have to get together and get it done.
What'll happen if they don't?
Well, I don't even want to talk about it because I think it would be very bad. I will be very angry about it, and a lot of people will be very upset.
Joining us this morning is Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You've said that you will not support the health care bill in its current form. Why not?
You know, I pledged to the voters to repeal Obamacare. I think it's a disaster, but the bill doesn't repeal it. It keeps about half of the Obamacare taxes. It keeps most of the Obamacare regulations. It keeps most of the Obamacare subsidies, and it creates a giant new insurance bailout super fund of about $200 billion. This isn't repeal by any means, shape, or form.
It's definitely not a repeal. You're right. And I spoke with one of your colleagues earlier, Senator Rounds, about your no vote. And I said to him, look, Rand Paul wanted a complete repeal, and that's what he told voters, and that's what he's sticking to. What do you want to say to him? Listen to what Senator Mike Rounds said earlier in the program, Senator.
I respect Senator Paul. I think he really is trying to get to the point where he feels comfortable with a new plan. But at the same time, I think I could make this bill better yet, but it may not be everything I want either.
Right.
But I'm not going to let the perfect get in the way of the good.
Yeah.
And right now, I'll take this over Obamacare.
What about that, Senator? What about the fact that if you do a complete repeal, there's a whole host of people in the middle there that will see higher prices? They will perhaps not have insurance. What do you do about the transition period?
I think the problem is that many Republicans have insufficient confidence in capitalism. Capitalism works in every other segment of our economy. What should we do to fix health care? We should allow more freedom, legalize inexpensive insurance, get the government out of the way, and have the confidence to believe that what made America great was freedom of choice, competition, capitalism, and that's what we need more of in health care. I proposed one aspect that I think would dramatically change things. The individual market is a terrible place to be. If you're a plumber or a welder and you have to buy insurance by yourself, nobody should have to do that. So what I've offered is an exit ramp for all of these people to join an association, any association you want across state lines where you can buy your insurance as a group. That would fix the vast majority of the problems. We have a backstop already in place for those who are disabled, who can't take care of themselves, called Medicaid and Medicare. So I think we really could handle this, but people forgot their promise. Their promise wasn't that, oh, we're going to make sure everybody has an insurance premium of X. Our promise was to repeal the disaster that is Obamacare. And if we don't repeal it, we're going back on our promise.
Well, one of your colleagues have said, look, this is expensive. This costs money, and we cannot have this plan look like we are basically cutting taxes for the rich and also at the same time cutting health care.
Well, we have to decide, is it the government's role to subsidize insurance and insurance companies? I don't think insurance companies should get a penny of our money. I mean, they made $15 billion a year in the group market. They segregate a very small part of the insurance market. They whine. They come to Washington and say, we need money. Oh, we want to help everybody, but the taxpayer has to pay us to help everybody. So it's this false sense of magnanimity that sort of says, oh, we're going to help everybody. But in reality, what the insurance company wants is a big bailout. And I'm not for bailing out any U.S. industry. I love American companies. I love American companies that make profit. But I'm not for giving any of them any money because that's simply crony capitalism.
But is there a bigger issue here, Senator, the fact that you have a big agenda that you need to execute, that the American people voted for in November? They want to see a repeal and replace, but then they also want to see tax reform. If you hold up the progress in terms of getting a bill out, getting a bill to the president's desk, do you jeopardize getting the rest of the agenda done?
I think there's a possibility that Republicans will shoot themselves in the foot by passing something that actually doesn't fix Obamacare. So I think actually I'm not advocating nothing, but nothing would be better than this bill because the death spiral of Obamacare is based on one fundamental flaw, and that is that you can buy insurance after you're sick and that we have these regulations that make insurance expensive so young, healthy people can't buy it. That death spiral leads to adverse selection and the rising premiums in the individual marketplace. That will continue under the Republican plan. They will simply subsidize the death spiral. That's what this stabilization fund does. The Republicans are acknowledging the death spiral of Obamacare will continue, and they're going to subsidize it. There is nothing Republican about that. There's nothing conservative about that, and I won't be part of that. If they want to take their nonsense, their big government spending programs, their throw the kitchen sink at everything, and put it in another bill and work with Democrats on that and tell conservatives we'll have a clean repeal, I'll vote for any variation of a clean repeal. I want 100%, but I'll vote for 50%, 75%. But I'm not voting to create new entitlements for insurance companies.
And you're willing to sit there and watch this implosion continue?
You know,
because you say it's going to continue regardless, is what you're saying.
The Democrats have created this disaster. We can fix it with freedom, competition, choice. I believe in what made America great, and that is capitalism. I'm all for injecting more capitalism in it to save the health care industry, to save that part of the marketplace. But I'm not willing to subsidize insurance companies. I think that's a terrible thing to do. It's crony capitalism, and it's not. There has to be somebody left in Washington who doesn't believe in crony capitalism.
What about the revenue end of this? Do you feel like you need to see revenue? Let's say you don't have. Let's say you do a complete repeal, and you convince your colleagues that we need to not take this to a vote. Do you need to see revenue, for example, in the tax package that hopefully is on the horizon?
Are you meaning, do we need to see new revenue to make it revenue neutral?
Yes.
I'm for a tax cut. I'm an old-fashioned Republican. I still believe tax cuts are good. I think we got the greatest economic growth back in the 80s and 90s as a result of Reagan's real tax cut, when we had a real tax cut. So I don't think it needs to be revenue neutral. I think if you want to make it deficit neutral, you cut spending. So I'm for making government smaller, but I'm not for shifting the tax burden from one group to another. I think if you really want growth, you cut rates and you have a significant tax cut that leaves more money in the hands of the producers, the private economy where jobs are created.
Senator, where do you cut spending?
I'd cut spending everywhere. And in fact, what I've proposed is, you know, the sequester we had was just for discretionary spending, which is about a third of spending. 2/3 of spending is mandatory spending. I'd have a sequester all the way across all spending. And the interesting thing about it is you don't have to cut that much. If you cut 1 penny out of every dollar, which means to the wealthy as well as to the poor, everybody's going to have $1 less that they get from the federal government. You end up balancing your budget in less than 5 years. It's an amazing thing. We just take 2/3 of our spending and we do nothing. It's on autopilot, growing at nearly 6% a year, and that's why we get further and further mired in debt. This Obamacare repeal does nothing to do that. In fact, it encourages the creation of new entitlement programs, which will make our debt problem worse.
Real quick, before we go, is there anything you can give on short of an overall repeal? I mean, just to get something done.
From the beginning, I've said I want 100% repeal, but I'll settle for any percentage repeal as long as we're not creating new entitlements. So, for example, the compromise is maybe some of the moderate senators would only repeal 50% and I want 100%. We can determine somewhere in the middle a compromise on what percentage repeal. I just am morally, philosophically, and personally, I find it objectionable to bail out insurance companies. That's not who we are as Republicans, and I find it objectionable to create new entitlement programs or for the federal government to be in the process of buying insurance.
Any of your colleagues agree with you? Because the Republicans cannot afford any more no votes.
They all agreed with me when they campaigned. They just have forgotten their campaign promise, which was to repeal Obamacare.
Right. Senator, it's good to have you on the program. Thanks so
Thank you.
much. We'll see you soon, Senator. Senator Rand Paul joining us there. We have breaking news right now. President